Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session about Audit International and what is new in 26.1. So before I start, I just quickly want to confirm something because it seems like we might have some technical difficulties. If you can maybe please, for the guys that are online, confirm for me that you can see my screen. I'm currently presenting the slides. And if you can see my screen, please just raise your hands so that I can confirm that you are actually seeing the sheet screen. Okay, no hands are being raised, so it definitely is. There, I can see some hand raised. Okay, so perfect. So it seems like the screen is working. So let's continue. Okay, so I'm Christian Stan. I'm the product manager for all of the assurance products, and I will take you through the Audit International session today. So important, we're running two sessions concurrently today. The Audit International one and the Probe one. So if you're a Probe user, you should be on the Probe session, and you and I will be presenting that, and I will be doing the Audit International one today. Then after this session, we have another one for financials and for IDEA, as well as our new client inquiries app. So please make sure you also register for that session so that you also can get the benefit of seeing what's there. So everyone is muted for today. You're welcome to use the chat function or the question function if you do have any questions during the session. If you maybe do lose signal, please just exit and enter the webinar again. And it also is best to use the actual application that you download rather than the web version. And after the session, as always, a recording will be made available on our YouTube channels, and you'll also get an email with the link. Okay, so the agenda for today, for the next hour and a half, we'll be looking at Audit International, what's new there, and then after that, we'll have a small break, and then in the next session, we'll look at financial statements, IDEA, and working papers. So for today, we will go through ISO 600, then we'll look at what is new, some features, some fixes that we've made, some content matters that we've addressed, or known matters that we've addressed, and then also some content in the product as well. So the first thing that you will notice is that there is actually two new folders in the document manager. It is under the financial statements folder, and it's called IDEA integration, as well as client inquiries received. So if you do get that in your firm template, please don't delete them. Those will be used for the IDEA integration that we will show you in the next session, when you actually can now integrate IDEA in working papers and actually bring the results from the IDEA working programs into the working papers itself. And then for client inquiries, we've developed a brand new app called Client Inquiries, and you can send client requests to your clients. They then respond, and as they respond, we can have that responses come in, and we've made a decision to put it into that folder, not into the relevant sections itself, so that you can still manage and control the information that comes in, but you are welcome to register for the next session, and then we'll go through that in a bit more detail. Okay, so ISO 600 revised is for special considerations, the audit of group financial statements, including the work of component auditors. So quite a big focus on component auditors as well. And you will see that we've brought in quite a few documents for group auditors. So this standard really deals with all the considerations that you need to apply when you're doing a group audit, as well as when you're doing work with component auditors. Now, just also remember, a group audit could also be an audit where you're auditing one company, but it's got different divisions that you then treat as components. So it's not just for consolidations. The standard is a bit broader than that. It also deals with one audit where there's multiple divisions, and you can break those divisions down. You audit those divisions separately, but then you don't want to use the word consolidate, but then you bring them back into the big one. So the standard also includes new application material, which we've included. It aligns with the ISO 220 as well as 315 changes that was made before. And then it also really strengthens the responsibilities of professional skepticism for the auditor, especially the group auditor. It is really much more of a top-down approach, where the previous one was more bottom-up approach, where you collected all the information and then you got an opinion. Now you need to decide what information you need, what work you want to do, send the instructions out, and then actually perform the work. The two-way communication, you can see, then becomes quite important, and then the documentation between the component auditor and the group auditor is very important. So this is effective for all of the group financial statements periods beginning on or after 15 December 2023. So our expectation is that this year December will be the first consolidations that you will then do, because it's beginning on or after, so most likely the December year ends that we have now. So important to note for Audit International, all the previous documents relating to group and component auditors have been removed. So any previous documents that we had that group auditor section with all of those Word documents. Those were based on the old standard. We've deleted all of them, they are gone. We've incorporated everything with ISO 600 revised into different documents, into various sections within the Audit International template, and then there's also some new documents that we've added. And that really enables the group auditor to compile a stand-alone audit file that supports the group evaluation. So you won't do the group and all of the subsidiaries all in one Caseware engagement file. You will have one for the parent company, you'll have one for the subsidiaries, and then you will have one for the actual group audit itself. So quite important to note how the template was designed. It's not all in one. You have to do it in separate engagement files. So let's explore that a bit. Let's say we have a group structure. There's Beta Holding Company, and there's subsidiary A, B, and C. So in this scenario, we will have 5 Caseware files. One for the Beta Holding Company, one for subsidiary A, one for subsidiary B, and one for subsidiary C. Those are the 4 files we'll have, plus the 5th one, which will then be the consolidation file, the group file that brings all of this together. And I'll show you what it does within the engagement file. It actually optimizes information in and out, because when you do document the information, and ISO 600 is quite strict with that, the revised one, is you need to differentiate between what are you documenting for the subsidiary, what are you documenting for the Beta Holding Company, and what are you documenting for the group. And by putting that all together in one engagement file, it will just be confusing in terms of what questions you need to answer for which of the entities. Is it a group question? Is it not a group question? So we have consolidated all of that in one. Then I also mentioned maybe there's a company, ABC, with a division X and a division Y. So in that case, you would also have to consider, if you're auditing the divisions separately, you then treat it as a component, and then you would need to have different files for that. And it might even be different teams doing those audits for division X and Y. And then the same counts as within the group audit. So we think about it, one opinion, one audit file. So how many audit opinions do we have to give in subsidiary or in scenario 1? We need to give to the client holding company, we need to give to the group, and all of the subsidiaries. So that's where the 5 files come. But with the divisions, how many audit opinions do we need to give? We only have to give 1. So the divisions are not separate entities, and they don't need financial statements to be audited or be done for specific audits. So company ABC will have 1 set of financials, 1 audit opinion, and 1 audit file. But you might still want to deal with the division X and division Y separately as components. So it's not a requirement for you to have it in separate files, but it could be done in separate files if it is maybe done within different teams. Okay, so let's look at also some of the features before we jump into the content and go into Audit International. We have updated the metadata, so that's just the information in the background, and this improves the efficiency of Caseware Cloud with the batch tool. So when you're using the batch tool to update your engagement files, it will then be much more smarter and faster to be able to update those engagement files for you. We have also improved the template update process so that your engagement files no longer go into a read-only mode unless you are in a smart sync safe state. So you've synced all of the information back, you have one outstanding, you can then update. And then we've also added a warning message. So when you try in the FSA to delete a specific financial statement area from that FSA, but it actually has a risk linked to it that is significant, you have to address that. And what we found is people are deleting some of those FSAs. So we've brought in a warning in the FSA now. If you're trying to delete or unlink an assertion that has a significant risk linked to it, it will no longer allow you to do that. Then in terms of the profiles, so many of you would have had these profiles switched off anyway. We had the ISA 315, the old profiles, I want to say pre-2019 profiles, still enabled on the file. It was profile 11 to 13, so that was your previous one, Form Plus, Core, Tail-up engagement profiles, and we have now removed them. So the only ones that now stay is the ones that we've done after ISA 315. There is really no reason for you to do any engagements pre-ISA 315, so that just removes some of the information from the file, which makes it easier and much more clearer to use. Then it's important to note though that if you did create any engagement files, so in that period between 2019 and maybe 2022, while you were still adopting ISA 315, if you for any reason use profiles 11, 12 or 13, those engagement files will not update this year because we've removed that. So for those, you would have to go and create a new engagement file based on their new profiles. You can still copy the information over from the engagement file. So with the import information, you can copy it over, but you have to use the new profiles. Okay. Then in terms of some of the other changes that we've made, we've updated the layout. So the dashboard when you open Audit International. So the control design section as well as the control design folder have been renamed to now say understanding system of internal control, both the folder and the dashboard. So that will apply after you have applied the master template. So just take note of this because the update works a bit different here for the two different things. The moment you install Audit International 26, your dashboards on all your engagement files will already update because we use one dashboard across all the engagement files. So if that name change in your current engagement files, it will change in your current engagement files. If you install the new version of Audit International, that is fine. We're not changing any content. We're just changing the name of the dashboard and it shouldn't have really any impact. But you will only get the new document and you'll only get the new folders when you actually do an update of the engagement file. Okay, so the dashboard will update immediately after installation on all of your engagement file, but the actual document manager and bringing in of the documents will only update once you have then updated that specific engagement file. Then some fixes and improvements that we've made. Previously when you tried to delete a group of procedures from a document, especially a work program, it didn't delete the group itself. So now we actually go and delete the group itself as well. And then we know also some of you import procedures. If you're creating new files or you have a library of controls, you then import that. So previously when you imported it, it didn't import the risks or the reportable items that were linked to it, but now it also does that for you together with the procedures that's linked to it. So it's much more easier to use. And then if you try to, in the past, import more than 30 risks into a work program or a checklist that gave you an unknown error, you can now actually import more than 30. So we've removed that limitation. Then when you're performing an engagement update, just be careful with the update all button because it used to not always apply some of the information, especially from the AO general options. You had to reapply that. but now we have updated that and fixed it so that that actually updates all of the documents when you do select update all, for those of you who do perform updates. And then we had one issue when after you did a template update, the case view documents would take a bit longer to open. We figured that out, we now understand why it's happening, and we fixed that. So new files and updated files after it's been updated should work exactly the same now and be as fast. Okay. Then I have a question here. Are we going to have to rework our previous files again with the new profiles? So that I'm assuming relates to profile 11 to 13. So if you did use profile 11 to 13, then unfortunately yes. But if you stayed on the profiles that we recommended, which was the profile, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which was also one form plus core and tail-up engagement, but the new ISO 315 profiles, then you would not have to rework any of your files. Those files will continue as normal, you can update them. So it was only if when you updated previously, you chose not to update with the profile that you were on, but you chose to move to profile 11, 12, or 13. So they used to say the old one form plus, old core, and old tail-up engagement. But if you went with the ISO 315 changes, you don't have anything to worry about. Okay. Then one known matter that we know about is in the work programs and also the checklist, sometimes you would see that the visibility conditions, those gray eyes, as well as tags, the blue eyes, might not be correct after you've updated the engagement file. So if that is the scenario, there's a red button at the top of every work program and checklist to update those tooltips for you. You can just click on that, and then the pop-up in those tooltips will be corrected. So that will make sure that we show you the right information to show you when a certain procedure is not showing or when that procedure is actually showing. So if you're running into a situation where the tooltips are not working, just click on that red button to update the tooltips. Then, before we jump into the content, the last one, integration. So important to note. We've received some support calls on this as well in the past, but the current version of Audit International is only allowed to integrate with the 2024 version of the financials that's also released yesterday, or the one version back 2023. Remember, we did a whole exercise in 2022 where we've changed the mapping, we've changed the grouping, the document manager is different, your financial statements areas are different. And if you try to integrate with that version, then you are going to run into issues where your FSA is not going to balance, you're going to have mapping issues, and then the amounts in your financials and the audit product will not agree. So please do not integrate with any 2022 or older sets of financial statements. But please update then also your financials to 2023 at least, or 2024, otherwise you'll run into issues. Okay. Then in terms of procedure changes, so we have quite a list of procedures that's been updated. So you remember for group, I said we deleted all of the group documents, and then we've now gone and we've added the procedures in between the different documents, and we've also added different documents. So I'm not going to go through all of the procedures changes. I think we might be here for the whole day, but we have a detailed change log for you within the release notes telling you in each document where did we add procedures, where did we delete procedures, where did we change procedures, and if it was a major update or a minor update. So the difference between a major update and a minor update is a major update does come through when you actually do the update, and automatically the procedures will come into the working papers file and then show within either the checklist or the work program where we've updated. The minor updates, those do not come in. You have the option when you have a case or an Audit International document open in case view, to say go and check for updates, and then you can choose to bring in the minor updates. So what are minor updates? Minor updates are small things that maybe we've changed the guidance a bit, but we don't want you to update the procedure just because we've changed the guidance. There might have been a spelling mistake. There might have been a reference change. The wording of the procedure might have changed slightly, but it's not changing the content. It's just been bringing or using a bit of a better English. So you don't have to update those minor procedures to be ultimately compliant with the standards, but the major ones you actually have to. So major, you don't have a choice, they come in automatically. Minor, you do have a choice, and that you do while you go check for updates within each of the files. Then we've also added 32 new procedures all across in the various documents, and we deleted 6 of the previous procedures that we had, some from the optimizer around the previous group documents, and here and there in some of the others. Okay, and then we have added new forms. So quite a few new documents for then the group engagements. And you'll see some of it deals with group and some of it deals with component. And then right at the end, we also have communication and the checklist for the partner to acknowledge in terms of ISO 220 and ISQM 1, their role and responsibility in this whole engagement. Okay, so we don't have to go through the list. I've got those documents open in Caseware already, and just so that you're not distracted, I think I'm going to switch off my camera, so then I can take you through the documents in a bit more detail. Okay, so you will remember that we used to have a group folder here, just underneath risk assessment summary. There is nothing for group there anymore. All those previous ones are now deleted, and we can only see that we've added some component auditor communication there. Okay, so a bit different than before, but that's where you can now see we've deleted all of the previous documents around group. And then what I've done is I've just marked all of the new documents as new for me, but I've already opened them for us so that we can go through them in detail. So in the optimizer checklists, you will note that we've added 2 new questions for you. So the first question deals with the engagement is a group audit, and then it gives a bit more detail. Under ISO 600 revised, a group audit is the audit of financial statements that include the financial information of more than one entity or business unit through a consolidation process. So for the purpose of ISO, the consolidation process include a consolidation, financial information of different entities or business unit, or the aggregation of the financial information of entities or business units. So business units, you remember I spoke about the different divisions in a company that could be there. Those are regarded as business units, and then entities is entities like we know them, a property or a company. And then the second question deals with, are there any component auditors involved in the engagement? So if you answer yes, we'll include the component auditors documentation. If you say no, we will then delete them. Okay. So let's deal with the component auditors first, and then we'll go back and deal with some of the others. So as I mentioned, the first thing we need to take note of is that the new standard is a top-down approach instead of a bottom-up. So top-down means you as the group auditor has to plan the audit and has to communicate the audit before the audit of those components starts. So if there's a component auditor involved, you actually have to communicate that to the component auditor upfront, what you want them to do, focus on, and that's in terms of the risk assessment that you have done for the actual group. You don't have to do it per entity or per component, but you might also want to involve the component auditor in assisting you with risk assessment procedures. So you might ask them, look, for that specific entity, I want you to do some risk assessment procedures. I need to know how the significant clauses of transactions work within that entity, which are there, and then you can then report back on those and say, yes, everything is, or the group component auditor reports back to you, and then that's how you decide how you want them to then actually go about the audit. So the first document we have for component auditors is 422, a worksheet selecting a component auditor. And what I've done already is I just went into options and switched on the document guidance. So if you're unsure of what a document's purpose is or the objective of a document, you can always switch on the document guidance. And the document guidance really gives you the objective and how to complete the document, as well as give you any abbreviations. So there's quite a few abbreviations that we've added as well. And if you're not sure what that means, we've put them in the guidance. So the objective of this specific document, the selecting a component auditor, is to assist you to select a component auditor, plan the work to be performed, as well as agree on the terms of the engagement and the communication with the component auditor. So you will then go and ask or answer some question. Is there a need for us to have a component auditor? You might say yes, there is a need, and then we want them to do risk assessment procedures, we want them to do physical inventory count, perform maybe shared services, if there's a shared service center. So you can also involve the component auditor on the centralized activities, and we'll go through later when we go through the groups, how do you actually plan whether there's centralized activities or not. Then you document the nature, the scope, and the objectives of including the component auditor. What must they actually do? What must you communicate to them? And there we've brought in the effective two-way communication. So remember, for them to actually execute their job, you need to communicate, and you need to communicate effectively. So some of the things you might consider is having a meeting with the component auditors, a planning meeting, status meetings, site visits to them, also discuss the dates and the methods you want to do some reviews, and then a retrospective on the lessons learned would be good practice, so that if you work with them again in the future, they know what is required. You can also decide on the level of involvement. So how involved are they going to be? Are they just doing the component auditors? But remember, those component auditors will also be key members of the engagement team, and they might also be involved in planning the group audit. So if you do that, then you need to involve them a bit more. Then you go again and get their credentials, make sure they can do it, they understand, and they can comply with your ethical requirements, including independence. So for them to agree to this, you also need to obviously disclose from a group's perspective what companies involved, what directors, who's those charged with governance, all of those things. Otherwise, they won't be able to say that they're compliant. Then we actually go to the actual communication, and we've given you a checklist to say, go through the following things, make sure that you have done this and documented this, and that you actually have done the communication. And then also have the component auditor communicate back to you what they feel are relevant, any related parties, and there's a list. You can also go and add to the list, but you can go and see what we and the standard kind of in the application material recommend you need to discuss. Then we also talk about the component performance materiality, and we'll go through that document. There's actually a separate document for that. If there's any subsequent events, how they must inform you, and then other matters. So any other matters that's there. And then you would conclude if there's any concerns with the component auditors, and based on your answer yes or no, we will then automate the conclusion for you. And then finally, as the group engagement partner, you then take responsibility for supervising, and the nature, timing, and extent, to make sure that they also are aware of what they need to do. Okay, so that is the selecting a component auditor. Now, when you're doing a group audit, you might have various component auditors, and it is going to be quite difficult to complete this document if you have, let's say, 5 component auditors. So our recommendation is when you have multiple component auditors, then also consider making a copy of this specific worksheet and create one for each component auditor. So the documents, you can definitely create a copy in the document manager, Control-C, Control-V, or you can add one from the library, and then you will have a copy. So then you can go and say, okay, this is component A, component B, component C auditors, and then you complete it for each one. Because what now happens if you do have 5 components and then one didn't do the communication, or you're not satisfied with one, and then you need to document that, but then you kind of documenting it for all. Okay. Then what we've also done is in the communication to the component auditors, we've added 2 documents for you, and we've added those 2 documents in Microsoft Word. So 5200 and 5201. So 5200 is the communication that you can do to the component auditor. So it's a sample letter, and it then allows you to communicate to the group auditor. And we've again just documented everything that the application material and the standard requires. You would then go and tailor this to work with your firm's letterhead, your firm's information, as well as putting all of the information that is relevant and giving a bit more information here. Okay, so that's 5200, and then 5201 is actually the instructions that you will send to the group auditor. So the first one is just you are the group or the component auditor, and here is your group audit instructions 5201. So we've already documented that for you, giving your information, how do you want people to communicate, early and immediate warnings. So quite a big document already included. Take it, make it your own, put in the information in here. You can't send it out exactly as is. You will have to go and tailor it. You'll see that we've put everything in green is where you would then go and tailor it specifically to make sure that it then works. So this is a sample letter of the group audit instructions that you can then use. Also important, documenting the key members of the component audit team, planning memo, and then the last piece is your significant audit matters if there's anything that comes up. Okay, then let me close those 2 documents, and then let's jump to the last one dealing with the component auditors then as well, and that is the 420.600. So 420 is our materiality document, and then we've added the 0.600. So you'll see that in a few documents to indicate that this is group. And this is a document that you would then go and assess the component performance materiality. So you remember I said when you're communicating in document 422, we'll also ask you to communicate where's that question now, the materiality, component performance materiality. And how do you calculate that, or where do you do it? It's in 420.600. So the objective of the document again is the classes of transactions, account balances or disclosures in the group financial statements that are disaggregated across the components, and then deciding on the component performance materiality and clearly trivial thresholds. Okay, so you'll first go, you'll select your group materiality, and then from there you will come in here to say what is the component performance materiality. So you'll now break it down and say how do you want to award the materiality for components. And if you've used the consolidate function within Caseware, then the group entities will be displayed here and you'll be able to choose the different components. Or if you don't, you can also type in the actual entity name if you just imported one big trial balance. Then you would say how are you disaggregating that specific component, the basis for the calculation, and then you type in the performance materiality. These are not calculations, it is input fields, because we don't have that specific trial balance most likely, and it's also a choice for you how you want to break it down based on the performance materiality that you've set for the group and how you want to award it to the different components. You then give your reasoning, and if there's any changes from planning to final, you'll document that there as well. If there's any specific circumstances, so component performance materiality for specific circumstances, so if you want to up the performance materiality, let's say for a very risky area, you can do that as well, document that, and remember to communicate. And then, have there been any revisions, yes or no, and what is the impact of those revisions on those specific components? You can then document those. Okay, so very similar to the current materiality document, but then you document how you split the materiality then across. Okay, so that deals with most of the component auditors work involved. Then if we look at an actual group, what else do we need to do when we talk about a group engagement? So the first document I want to look at is 590.600. And here we again look at the components at which audit work will be performed. So this is now where you as the auditor, the group auditor, make a decision and document what components are there and where you want to do the work. So you will go and look at our component performance materiality for all the components that you've documented. Again, if you've consolidated, they will be in the list. If you're using the consolidate feature, if you don't, you can type them in. Make sure that you have typed all of them in. Then you complete the component scope of work considerations, and that is then this specific table. So what have you identified for that specific component? So have you identified any risks, yes or no? Do you want to disaggregate the SCOTB, significant clauses of transactions, account balances, and disclosures? And we also give you some information around that. So any material clauses of transactions, or which then become significant, or if there's a significant risk raised to those specific items, then you might want to focus on that. Sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. So when you do the work on the component auditors, from the work that is then planned and those instructions you've sent to the component auditors, will you obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence? Yes or no? If you say no, then obviously you have to go and do some more work as the group auditor on that section yourself or on that specific company. So it might be that an entity is reviewed and it didn't have an audit as part of the group, but now you are doing the group audit and you identify a significant clause of transaction, maybe investment property, that you want to have a look at the revaluation. And there you might say the group or the component auditor, there is actually no component auditor because they only did a review or not obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and you can then document further what you want to do. Okay, but I'm going to go with yes. Were there any past misstatements, yes or no? Any past control deficiencies? And does the entity have centralized activities, yes or no? So remember, as a group auditor, you can decide whether you, let's say the revenue function or the payroll function is being done from head office, done from the group itself. You can then say, yes, it does for that specific clause of transaction, and you then want to either audit that at component level or at group level. And that's where we will then say, is it required at component level, yes or no? If we say yes, will we use a component auditor, yes or no? And then document how the component auditor will be involved, how the group auditor will be involved, what financial reporting framework are they using, and then what is the year end. So for us, 28th February is the year end. So let's say this specific entity had a 31st of July year end. So there you can just keep track of all your components, the significant clauses of transactions that they have, and how you will address it. And we've given you 5 lines, but you can obviously go and insert much more for each of the components and document the clauses of transactions. Okay, so that's 590.600. Then if we move on to document 535, so what does this document do? It's understanding the financial reporting process. So we've added this document in, and it really is for you to understand the entity's financial reporting process through understanding the risk of material misstatement. And it helps you with, we previously had document 530, but this one now just helps you in a bit more in understanding the financial reporting process. So especially in a group, this document will come in handy to understand how are they doing the financial statements closing process, any events and conditions that exist, subsequent event procedures, any disclosures, centralized financial reporting activities, and then the reporting frameworks. And here we have quite a few procedures around the group applicable reporting framework. And then we say document the following related to the IFRS. What does IFRS stand for? Applicable financial reporting framework. So again, in the document guidance, we do give you that information. Then we talk about the group financial reporting process, the consolidation process, subsequent events for that, any centralized activities, and then there's your consolidation process as well. And we give you guidance there from the application material. Anything related to fraud, common controls, your IT environment. Then we move into understanding journal entries, so a lot more around that. Any consolidation adjustments, so how frequently do they have transactions between the business units and the group, the financial reporting framework, fair values, something you might want to consider, and then also how do they control those journal entries. And then did you communicate those significant matters and the impact there, especially between the different components, and then communication of the reporting responsibility. So who is doing the reporting? And there you have to consider between the people within the entity, the components, those charged with governance and management, as well as with external parties. And you will then go ahead and conclude. Okay, then we move over to document 622, evaluating the work of a component auditor. So you have now decided that you are using a component auditor in document 422, and you've created a separate work program for each one of those, or a worksheet for each one of those. You have then used 5-100 to actually communicate to that component auditor. And now in document 622, they then submit the work that they have done back to you. And this is what the purpose of this document is. So it is to assist in the evaluation of the adequacy of the work of the component auditor. So we just guide you through the process. Once they've submitted the information back to you, the communication from the component auditor, whether the communications received are adequate for the purpose of the group auditor. So did they do everything we asked for? Did they confirm that they cooperated with the request of us? Any matters that are relevant to the risk assessment that they've seen, any events that may cause doubt on the continuing as a going concern, and everything that we asked them in the beginning to do, have they actually done it and have they communicated it? Have they given us any significant matters? And then also we go into evaluating the sufficiency and appropriateness of the audit evidence obtained from the component auditor. So did we get evidence around and evaluate the risk assessment procedures? any high risk procedures that they have executed and what the results were, or if we asked them to do it, but that's the results. And then regarding the component or consolidation process, if the work was appropriate. Any additional reviews that we need to implement in terms of that audit documentation, any additional procedures we want them to do, so they might come back and say, look, we found a specific risk in this area, this is the work that we've done, are you happy with that? And the group auditor can say, no, we actually want you to also do A, B, and C, and that's then where we will do it and then communicate it back to them. We evaluate the audit evidence that they have done, any uncorrected misstatements, and then you conclude to say that the audit evidence obtained is sufficient and appropriate to reduce the risk of your misstatement to an acceptably low level. And again, because we're talking component auditors and there can be multiple component auditors, our recommendation is that when you have multiple component auditors, you also create a copy of this document. So similar to 422, 622, you should have corresponding copies of that, so that when you communicate to a component auditor, you also evaluate them, and you can't evaluate all of them together. We recommend that you evaluate them separately. Then if we look at financial reporting, so document 635, also quite a few new procedures around group, and the relevant ISA is ISA 600. So brand new financial reporting audit procedures, and it's a core document. And this document is to respond to the risk of income statement from the financial reporting process, and then evaluate how they have prepared the financial statements with the applicable financial reporting framework. Okay, so you would obviously have to go and tailor these procedures based on the financial reporting framework that the client is using, whether it is IFRS, IFRS for SME, entity specific, GRAP, IPSAS, you would then tailor that. So we just give you some few example of procedures that you can do, looking at adjustments, the working papers that's there, the cash flows, any foreign currencies that they reconcile those, accounting policies, any disclosures, and do they have supporting documents for that, disclosure checklists for your financial reporting framework, any other information, and make sure that there's no window dressing in the financials. Okay, so make sure that as part of the consolidation in those consolidation journals, they didn't go and change the substance of those transactions and window dressed or disclosed, or disclosed the wrong information, or did not disclose all the information. Then we also look at the actual consolidation process, just making sure that you've brought everything together, you've looked at all the adjustment, all the consolidation schedules, and you have done what is needed. So this is like the last step, bringing everything for you together in terms of the financial reporting process. So you can see there's quite a few, there's off-balance sheet arrangements, undisclosed items, unconsolidated entities, why it's not consolidated, why are they excluded, any acquisition of entities if they had, disposal of entities if they had, make sure those are added correctly, shareholding, related parties, the tax positions, any provisions, and then make sure that the accounting policies have been applied consistently. Then the last piece is the audit plan completion. So now we almost ending to the end of the audit plan. So there's our professional skepticism, management judgments, any misstatements that become or any new risk pop up, and then how do we respond to those, and then we'll again conclude. Okay, so then after that, what we need to do is we also need to communicate the worksheet. So what we've done is we've added document 340 in the reporting section. So that is a worksheet, again, matters to be communicated to management and those charged with governance. And this is, if we read the objective again, to promote effective two-way communication between the auditor and those charged with governance. So we've previously communicated to the components. Now we are talking to the entity themselves. And what do we need to communicate to those charged with governance? And what matters do have to be communicated? Okay, and we give you a bit of detail there as well. So you've always had to communicate with those charged with governance, but in a group, even more so. And who do we communicate? Who is considered those charged with governance? So the most important part is, have you determined who those charged with governance is, as well as the entity's governance structure when it comes to a group? It's not necessarily just the parent company, could be other people as well. So you have to make sure that you are familiar with that, and then have you communicated to those charged with governance on a timely basis what your responsibilities is and what their responsibilities is. Then we deal with independence, the plan and the scope, as well as the timing of the audit, any fraud items, and remember, this is just a checklist. You can't send this to those charged with governance. It's a checklist for you to say, I have done all of the following things. Any significant findings, have you communicated those? And have you remedied it? And you would then have to have a letter for not each one of these. You can kind of group it together, but it has to be communicated. Any significant findings from the engagement? How will you do it? Did you communicate efficiencies in internal control? And then making sure that yes, you have done that, and how you have done it as well. If we then move on to 340-1, so this is communications to be made with the auditor, made by the auditor with those charged with governance and management. And this is again just promoting the two-way communication. So there we have done and given you the checklist of what you need to communicate then with those charged with governance as well. So yes, you have, and we can then go through the checklist. This is more than just the ISO 600 communication, so this brings everything together. So quite a nice checklist to make sure that you actually have, through the process, communicated everything that you had to communicate. So you can also see we filtered it into the different areas of the audit, planning, performing, and then the last part, reporting as well. And we've then detailed everything that has to be communicated, and you will then conclude that there has been communication and it has been timely. So this document you'll kind of complete in bits and pieces. It won't be one on its or all at the end. You could, I guess, but you would ideally want to make sure that as an engagement partner, you go through this process as you go through. And you can also filter for the procedures. If you say, let's just do, let's deselect all, I want to look at planning now. So what must I communicate as part of the planning process? Yeah, I can see all of my planning procedures. And before you move on, make sure you've communicated all of that and that everything was in place. If you're then done, you can say, okay, now we are moving to the responding to the risks, and have we communicated that? And then you'll go through completion and reporting then as well. Okay, and then the very last document that we are going to deal with today is document 310.-1. So there's already a 310 for the partner sign-off, but now we have included another 1-1 for you to also go through the ISO 600 requirements and just help engagement partners to make sure that in terms of ISO 200 and 220, that all your roles and responsibilities have been completed and you've actually documented it. So that's the important part of this document, to make sure the engagement partner's responsibilities have been, it says completed, but I actually want to say documented, because it has to be documented that you have done it. So relevant ethical requirements, this is not a document that you will have a manager or a senior complete and sign off. the audit partner, the engagement partner, has to actually complete this. This is why we've called it the partner acknowledgement. And the engagement partner will go through and say, yes, I've completed this with no exceptions, and then actually sign off on this. So you can see there the relevant ethical requirements, independence, compliance with laws and regulations. And then the procedures are worded very differently to say, I understood the relevant ethical requirements, including those related to independence, and I applied my knowledge and ensured that members of the engagement team were aware of relevant ethical requirements, threat to ethical compliance through complying to the firm's policies and procedures, and then I remained alert through the engagement for breaches of ethical requirements, as well as appropriate action was taken to resolve any matters that came about. So these are very specific because you can see it also deals with the firm's policies or procedures, and you need to make sure if you're part of a group and you have component auditors that you've communicated your firm's policies or procedures as well. So remember, if you don't yet have an ISQM system of quality management system, that would be required as well. We do have an SQM product available if you need help with that, but you have to document your system of quality management, and you need to also communicate that to the component auditors if they're part of the engagement team. Then were there any breaches, professional skepticism, how you maintain that, did you have quality monitoring and remediation systems in place, same thing for the component auditor, communication, any risk assessment, risk response, and we give you some hyperlinks so that you can see where it's been documented, just to help you through the process to kind of answer all of these questions. So quite a few questions, as you can see. Was the partner involved? So you can really see you can't have a manager or a junior complete these procedures. This is as the partner, you actually have to go and sign off on these procedures. Cool, so that brings us then to basically the end. So that was now document 310, all the way in the engagement wrap up section. So that's now basically the last part that you have done. Then last year, you'll remember that we added a document 380. Hopefully you don't have to use that, but that's the last document basically in the document manager, and that is when you have to withdraw. And also what we've done is we've grouped with 310 your worksheet matters for future considerations. So if you continue to be the client or the auditor for this client, remember as you document any issues, you can then document matters for future considerations. So there in type, matters for future considerations, and then you can document those. Those will then pop up in the matter for future considerations worksheet as well, and you can then have that ready for next year so that when you actually do have to deal with that, you can deal with that. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the content. Let me quickly see if there's any other questions. Okay, the one about the profiles I've answered. And can we get a recording? Yes, a recording is made available after the session. Okay. I'll also give a few more minutes for questions. So if there are questions, you're welcome to ask. But before you go, I'll also just want to point out you should have received an email. You'll also see on our social media that we have received some feedback and some questions around the market, around extending our support hours. So since, I want to say mid-July, we have now extended our support hours from 7 to 7. And we really hope, especially for the guys in Africa as well, with a bit of different time zones, that we can now accommodate you a bit better with our support desks as well. So please note, our support team are now available for 4 more hours during the day, and they are there to really assist you. What we've also incorporated when you go onto the community is you can book your appointment. So if you wanted to book an appointment with a support member at a specific time, you can now also do that, and it's quite easy to do. So then you don't have to wait on the phone line for someone to get to you. The booking will put a meeting invite in your calendar and their calendar, and you will then meet with them at that specific point in time. And then finally, if you haven't attended the Get Ahead series, just a reminder that all of the Get Ahead training, which is free, available on YouTube, is available still to you. We've uploaded all of that content to YouTube for everyone to go and watch, and it really is a nice introduction into the various products. So there's 3 streams. There's one for working papers and the financials, then there is one for Audit International, and there is one for Probe. So you can go and watch those videos if you have new staff joining. If you are not familiar with something specific, we do have those Get Ahead series available for you that you can actually go and join. Okay, so there is one question. Let me see, that question just came in time. When would these updates be effective on the existing and running files? So we have released the templates yesterday. So you can already go and download them. So remember, how do you access your software? You would have to go to success.casewareafrica.com. On the Success community, you log in, and once you have logged in under My Software, there is the option for you to go and download the new versions of Caseware as well as Audit International. Once you've downloaded it and installed it, it is possible for you to then go and document the information or update the engagement file specifically. Then another question, is it possible to update the older files to capture new documents, or do we need to open entirely new files? And if we update, will existing information get lost? Okay, great question. So let me quickly go back to working papers. You definitely don't have to lose information or capture the new documents in separate engagement files. You have the option to go and update your audit engagement files. So at the bottom, I've already updated, but at the bottom, there's a check for updates version. So once you've gone to the community, you've installed the new versions, you will most likely also get a prompt when you open an old file that's an AI25. But if you don't get a prompt, because maybe in the past you selected, I don't want to get prompts or updates, you can also come in and click on check for updates. The check for updates will then run. It will inform you that there's an update available, and you can then run that update. That update will bring into the current engagement file all of the new documents. Now, just remember, some of the documents have changes. Some of the procedures have changed. So we don't recommend that you update an engagement file in progress. Our recommendation would be is update before you start with the engagement. So let's say this is last year's file. I would then go and do a year-end close on this specific file and roll it forward into next year. And the first thing I would do is I would then check for updates. I'll update to version 26. I'll get the new documents within my engagement file, and depending on how you've set up your profiles, most of the information in your planning sections will retain, but the work programs will then be blank because those are the work that you'll have to do every year. And then from there, you would be able to use all of the new documents within the current engagement file. Your trial balance will also move the balances from last year or from this year to last year. So that will happen. You can see this one has already been rolled forward for a year, and you'll get all of the new content. But if you don't want to go through that process or go through the update process, you also have the option of doing a new file, but retaining some of the information. So if I go File New, and if I select then Audit International, let's put in the name, you can create file and import data. So this is what we call File New from existing. So you create a new file. from the existing information that you have, but you paste it on the new template. And doing it that way will also retain information for you. But then as a last resort, if for whatever reason, maybe you are now on profile 13 and that's not the right profile you want to be on, you actually need to be on a different profile. What you can do is, I just want to go to a document like this. And the first thing that you can do is per document also import information. So let's highlight external cells and see what information can actually be imported. So if I go to options within any of the worksheets within Audit International, you can highlight the external cells. Those will highlight the information that we can actually import in between files. So obviously we can import the components, the financial statements disclosures, but we're not allowing you to import materiality information because that will change file on file year on year. And then once you see what information will import, and if that interests you, you can do that. You go import external data, and that we just give you a warning to say it will overwrite the information that's currently here. You say yes, and you choose the file you want to import that from, and you do that on a document per document basis. So quite a few ways for you to retain as much information that you want to from the prior year to the current year. The recommendation obviously from us is to roll forward, do an update, and then that's how you will retain most of the information. But if for whatever reason you want to start from scratch or you want to base it on a different profile, you can do that as well. Okay. Any other questions? Doesn't seem like that. So if there's no other questions, thank you so much for everyone's time. I really hope you are going to enjoy the new version of Audit International. Good luck with all of the consolidations and the group audits. Hopefully we help you in that regard, and you are super efficient when it comes to that consolidation process. And then if you haven't yet, please register for the next session. We will see you there with all of the changes in financials, working papers, as well as in the two new products in terms of Caseware Idea Easy add-ons and the cloud inquiries. Thank you so much for joining this session, and I hope to get some feedback from you soon around how the release is going and how you are finding the content. Have a great day.